Is Cmon totally effed? Yes. End video. Oh, sorry, we need to talk a little bit more. Cmon just sold Zombicide, right? When I talked about earlier Blood Rage, Ankh, Rising Sun, you're like, okay, well, these are the middling upper tier ones, right? Where you know you're going to get a good cash value, but you're going to stay afloat longer. Holy F-balls, Batman, you just sold Zombicide, right? This is not your mom and pop shop style game. Comparably, they say they have sold upwards of 2 million copies of Zombicide, and I would argue that's probably actually on the low end of things if I had to guess, because when you say cultural hobby impact of a game, right? There is probably not one made, we're going to be very specific about this, not one made in the last 5 or so years that has more of an impact than Wingspan. But you can make the argument that Wingspan, they say, has sold about 2.4 million copies. All the Zombicides only at 2 million? That's how big of an IP this is, which then makes me go and think this has to be absolute desperation. You don't sell your flagship. You don't sell the one that has raised $40 million on crowdfunding if you don't have to. And Asmodee, let's not pretend that Asmodee isn't preying and poaching on things as well, because this is what they did in the 2010s. They bought up the small publishers, distributors, IPs. Look at Plaid Hat Games, folks. Look what happened with that whole scenario going back and forth. But don't worry, they're going to be proud to own the iconic Zombicide IP to further strengthen their tabletop games portfolio, reinforce our presence in key geographies. I can't wait for the team to get to work at what's coming up next for this fantastic IP. So it's not just going to be a grab and resell. Maybe you will still have some more support for it, because if you have an IP that's literally printing money like this, wow, you're really, like I said before in the other video, robbing Peter to pay Paul for this one. Now, Cmon put out an update shortly after this. It is their most iconic game. It's the one they always will hold dear to their hearts. But it's important that they continue under the guidance of a company familiar with the series. And to be fair, they do some distribution of their product in the first place. And current support for Zombicide White Death is still going to go on for the next 6 months. And they're going to handle all of the things that go along with that. And then they briefly touch on, our priority remains to deliver a great experience. We're focused on doing that for our current campaigns, future campaigns in development. Well, you've said you don't have any future campaigns in games in development, right? Progress is being made towards fulfillment, and that's true. Like I said previously, we have seen some updates of the ones, especially like the DC United with Spin Masters and some of those copies, but creating iconic tabletop games is in their DNA, so they're going to be coming back later this year with more news. Ooh, dog. Everything is fine. Everything is fine. Everything is fine. Everything is fine. Now, going back, though, this begs the question, because there were reports last year or earlier this year when some of this stuff came out more about Cmon that they had failed to sell an IP worth allegedly about $12 million last year to a buyer that backed out. So what are you getting for this? Are you getting pennies on the dollar? Are you getting 10? Or what else are you getting? Because I didn't think, you were that far under in that way. But is this enough to push you way back over and you just said, screw it, let's just make sure? Or is this, again, just one of those I'm barely keeping my head floating above water scenarios at the same time? Which is weird, because the Board Game Wire article talking about this actually goes into further detail, saying that they're going to try to grow European wholesale market, initiate production of small games in Europe to reduce the logistics costs of fulfillment, in addition to debuting several games at Essen at retail. So we're still at like 18 projects unfulfilled, over $18 million worth of crowdfunding that is unfulfilled, and this is a whole hell of a lot of stuff. And you can't, as this article says, in Cmon's, blaming the rising living costs of customers' abilities to buy games, resulting in the 17% drop in revenue last year. No, You're putting out the same old crap with some of this stuff. You're preying on FOMO, and less people are getting in. You're just getting less people in buying this as well. It's not just a rising cost of living. There's a saturation point when it's the same thing, big box, mechanically speaking, overarching miniature whalification, as someone said on one of my other videos. The absolute tier of deluxeification to the top, utmost. So where does this leave things? Is this truly, as I said previously as well, a fire sale? Are we going to see other things leak out? I would assume you're not going to have anything else leak out that is still in the process of production, right? All of these properties that they have sold are not currently in the process of being fulfilled. So we're not seeing any direct sell over, sell off, carryover like that with like the Uniteds, or I thought my Cthulhu Death May Die was still sitting behind me when I turned around, but it's not. You're not seeing any of those that are still outstanding in that way. And as big of a freaking bonfire as this is, I would also say that this has enough cash flow potentially, if they really raised almost 8 figures, that I would expect that this could keep them afloat. The death blow for me, if this isn't it, let's say, is if you see them sell anything that is currently not fulfilled. That would be the absolute utter line that I could see not being crossed until that point. So where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us already talking about this again for 2 times now in less than a month. So I would guarantee at this point that I will be talking about this at least once more in the next 6 months, the second half of 2025. And I'm hopefully going to be giving it some more positive news in that aspect. But at this point, if you're going to also wager that that's not going to be the case and it's going to be another along these lines, I wouldn't be surprised. Peace out. Stay classy.